I was like, I'm an athlete. I can't be pregnant right now. NCAA rules, if a woman finds out they're pregnant, student health can't release it to the athletic department. Less than 4 hours after the court order went into effect, I was put in the hospital and spent a week in the hospital.
I don't think people understand like the emotional weight that comes with knowing something like that.
It was a long uphill battle of trying to kind of refigure out who was in my circle, who wasn't.
But I always tell women, you don't want the microwave man. You know,
True.
The quick, easy, like he looks good, but he's just, quick and easy right then and there.
The doctor finally comes back in. She goes, so we're canceling your ultrasound to check and see if it's a cyst because you're actually pregnant.
Welcome to today's episode where I'll be talking to a former Division I athlete whose life took an unexpected turn during her freshman year at NC State. Amidst the demands of being a collegiate athlete and the uncertainties of COVID, she discovered that she was 22 weeks pregnant, an unexpected revelation that would change the course of her life. From navigating an unplanned pregnancy as a student athlete to returning to the court just months after giving birth, her story is one of resilience, personal growth, and finding support in the most unlikely places. If you're listening to the podcast for the first time, Unplanned and Untold is completely donor funded. You can leave a tax-deductible donation through the link in our show notes if you believe that no student mom should face an unplanned pregnancy alone. You can also leave a 5-star review for free if you love the show. Please welcome Daniela McDonald to Unplanned and Untold. So Daniela, take our listeners into what it was like to be a D1 college athlete before you found out you were pregnant.
It was amazing. So I actually graduated high school early. I went and trained with my team over at NC State all spring semester, got the full college experience. Going into my fall season, I started pretty much every single game up until I ended up having an injury halfway through my freshman season. But I mean, it was kind of like a dream just because I made the dream that I wanted come to reality with the fact that I started as a freshman. And that's kind of, as a athlete in general, that's your dream. Be a D1 athlete, start your freshman year, get recognition, yada, yada. So
that really is a dream. I mean, I'm fangirling over here because I played volleyball my whole life. I did get a scholarship opportunity, but not to a D1 school, girl. So you go, girl.
Thank you.
What position did you play? I'm so curious.
I was an outside hitter.
Same. Yep. We need to pepper sometime.
Yep. Pepper partners.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So I have a little daughter and I'm like, oh, please, I want you to play volleyball because it's just the best. It's a fast-paced sport. I mean, there's so much camaraderie. The teams are usually on the smaller end and I just love it. I always have a love for the sport, as I'm sure you do too.
I do. Yeah. It's really fun because my daughter now, I coach around here in local high schools and, she's starting to get balloons because she's still too little to actually be able to pass the volleyball, but she knows the fundamentals of it. So she'll get balloons and go pass the little balloons around the gym. It's cute. So
that is so sweet. So walk us through how you ended up finding out you were pregnant.
So that's a little bit of a crazy experience I had. So, I'll walk you back through my freshman season, kind of end of freshman season for me. So my coach ended up getting fired. And so I was without a coach for about 2 months through the beginning of my spring season, my freshman year. And through that time, I was just recovering from injury, super excited to be able to get back on the court. Meeting a new coach, we found out that my coach was actually the former assistant coach of the U.S. national team.
Wow,
and so
that's a big deal.
That was really exciting to be able to train under someone at that level.
Yes.
Coming off of my freshman season. And I was super excited specifically because I was like, this kind of gets me a chance to kind of redeem myself, get back on the court. So I worked my butt off that whole spring season. That spring season was also the season that COVID hit. So I ended up only actually having 2 weeks with that coach before I left for spring break. And during spring break was when we got told we were being sent home for the rest of the semester and not able to return to campus. About a month after we got sent home, I started talking to my athletic trainer. We had regular meetups with all of our team and staff, even through COVID. We met through Zoom and I was talking to her and I was like, I have this weird cramping on the right side of my body and I don't really know what's going on. I don't have a period, but that's not super unusual for athletes
No.
because when we're training at such a high level, we can lose our period. And so they weren't super concerned about that. They were more concerned about the pain I was having.
Okay.
So she was like, well, we're just going to send you to student health because I lived near campus, even though I was back at home. I grew up in the local area, so I was able to go back to campus to get the resources I needed. And so I went to student health, and they went through the entire appointment and we're like, okay, well, we're going to get you an ultrasound. It could be a cyst. Like, we don't know. By the way, we do still need to go ahead and pregnancy test you. So I'm sitting at the end of this appointment for probably about 20 minutes. And I don't know if they retested it like 2 or 3 times, but the doctor finally comes back in. She goes, so we're canceling your ultrasound to check and see if it's a cyst because you're actually pregnant. And based on feeling your stomach, we think you're probably around 16 to 20 weeks pregnant. So NC State doesn't have an ultrasound on site, which means that they were like, well, we have no idea if it's a fallopian tube pregnancy, if it's a viable pregnancy. We can't tell you anything right now. We have no idea how far along you are, even because I was not showing at all. Wow. And I was like, well, I'm not going to the ER. We're in the middle of COVID. Like, that's the last place I want to go.
No one wants to go. I had to go to the ER once during COVID, and it was terrifying.
So I was like, well, I'll just kind of figure it out. I started asking them questions. I was like, can I go to these different places around campus? Because I knew of a couple local places just because of growing up in the area. And they're like, you can go where you want. Like, that's not for us to tell you. Okay. And so about a week later, I told my mom.
Wow.
And
were you scared?
I was terrified. So I took all my finals. I knew that I was pregnant, but I was not ready to tell anybody. And so I took my entire week of finals, my last week of that semester. And then I told my parents after I finished my finals.
I don't think people understand like the emotional weight that comes with knowing something like that in going through finals. I mean, finals are stressful as it is. You're also an athlete. You have a lot on the line, and now you have to tell your parents. So how does that, transpire? So
I locked myself pretty much in my room the entire week of finals, and I blamed it on the stress of finals. It was not the stress of finals, but I was like, I'm not talking to anybody. No. Just leave me alone. Okay. So my mom and I were on a walk around our neighborhood about a week after I found out, and at the end of the walk, I kind of just blurted it out. I was like, I don't know how else to tell you. I'm just going to kind of tell her. And she thought I was kidding at first. She was like, haha, this is so funny. Like, not funny. And I was like, no, I'm serious. So that was kind of a really sweet moment for us because, like, despite the fact that she was in shock, she was also excited. And she ended up telling my dad, and my dad was the one that, he came up to my room after she told him, and he was crying, excited to be a grandpa. So it was a really sweet moment because I didn't know how they were going to react. And
I mean, not many parents react like that. I'm going to tell you, I have interviewed countless women on this podcast, and it's very rare that that is their reaction. And it's just so moving to hear. How did your parents' support help impact your ability to face what was ahead?
I think they really helped me, especially through telling NC State, because at that time, before I told my parents, I had told one friend. Okay. I told her the day that I found out I was pregnant just because I needed to tell somebody. And, she was a student athlete at a different university. And she was like, well, you realize you're probably gonna not be able to play your sport anymore. And so I kind of talked with my parents about that. I called my athletic trainer first, because NCAA rules, if a woman finds out they're pregnant, student health can't release it to the athletic department. So, which it protects athletes, which is a great thing. But at the same time, now you're the one calling them and telling them, hey, I'm pregnant, instead of them finding out another way, which is good and bad. But I called I think my athletic trainer might have known. I have no idea. Her and I have never really talked about it, but typically I figured when the health records aren't released, they probably have a inclination. So
when they're withheld, they're like, what are they not telling us?
So, thankfully, because of that, I was able to tell her, and you have to give permission in the athletic department for them to release information about pregnancy. So the NCAA really does, and Title IX really does protect women in that capacity, but, I then had to go to tell each coach individually and tell each staff member individually. So that way, and then once my immediate staff member knew, they were able to go, I gave them permission to go tell our AD. And so then it was able to kind of start getting out. I think one of the most special moments was when I called my head coach, because mind you, I had only been in person with him for 2 weeks by the time.
COVID.
So I knew him over the phone, but I really didn't know him in person very well. And because he was the U.S. Olympic coach, it actually wasn't the first time he's walked through pregnancy with a woman, because at the national level, those girls have families, they get pregnant out of season, have a kid, go back and play. And so when I told him that I was pregnant, he was like, okay, we'll get you the resources you need to be able to come back and play. Like, we're in the middle of COVID right now, so you're stuck at home anyways. So it was super sweet because I had no idea how he was going to respond, and he was super encouraging through that.
Did you expect that? Did you expect your coach to be somebody who was disappointed? I know you barely knew him, but I mean, there is a lot of discipline involved in playing a collegiate sport at that level. And I can only imagine just the fear. I mean, your parents are one thing, but then coaching staff is a completely different conversation. Were you worried what his reaction would be?
I think so. I think kind of what helped a little bit was I was actually 22 weeks pregnant when I found out I was pregnant.
Okay, wait, hold on. So
I realized I left that total detail out.
So they thought you were probably around 16-ish weeks. Yeah. How did you find out you were?
So my mom got me an OB appointment during the middle of all this chaos.
Okay.
She was able to call her OB, and they got me in and pretty much got me that whole week. I knew the gender. I saw the anatomy scan. I saw everything. So they confirmed it was not a fallopian tube pregnancy. They confirmed that it was 22 weeks. They confirmed that it was a girl. I mean, it was just like boom, 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 boom. So
that's so much to take in. Yeah. I mean, was your mom with you? Tell me you weren't alone.
So I had to be alone because COVID rules wouldn't allow anybody to go in person at all.
I mean, there's such a difference with your first ultrasound being a tiny little baby with a tiny heartbeat, and then being able to wrap your mind around the fact, okay, I'm growing a human, life is going to change. But I cannot imagine going into an appointment thinking you're going to see something small and then have a full-on anatomy scan. I mean, at 22 weeks, you've got every part of that baby fully developed. You know the gender. You must have been in complete shock, and you're by yourself.
Yep. So she was sucking her thumb.
Oh my!
That was the first thing I saw.
Oh my goodness.
So that was very surreal, was seeing a human being sucking their thumb inside my body on this little screen. Yep.
Surprise. Was your mom just floored it was a little girl?
Yeah, she was super excited. Especially because the rest of my household, my brothers and my dad, we have all boys in the rest of my family. So it was kind of nice to have another girl.
So sweet. So how did your friends, family, community, how did they rally around you and support you during this time?
So it was really fun. After I told my coaches, I told my teammates separately. So we were on a call actually without our coaches. And that was when I told them. I had told 2 of my teammates before I got on the call because I was really scared of how everybody else was going to react. So I needed to kind of like feel it out.
Yes.
But it was really fun telling those first couple teammates because they were so excited when I called them and told them, and then watching the rest of my team, obviously in shock at first, but then realizing there's going to be a baby, and they all got excited about it. They ended up making me this really big care package once they got back to campus and sending it over with a ton of baby supplies. I had my whole neighborhood threw another baby shower. My family threw a separate baby shower, and then my church threw a baby shower. So I had total of, I think, 3 baby showers by the end of it because I had so many different groups that came together to help out.
They showed up and showed out. That's such a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah.
So after you've wrapped your mind around, okay, I'm going to have this baby, but your coach was just so great to encourage you to come back, to not quit, to not let that be how you ended your volleyball career. What did it look like having your daughter and then coming back to the court?
So I worked out pretty heavily up until about 33, 35 weeks, which I have a video on social media that shows me lifting weights, and people still talk about it all the time of
I love
how
it.
are you able to do that at 33 weeks? But I had the clearance of my doctors. So I worked out, and then I consistently walked all the way up until I had my daughter. So strength and conditioning wise, I wasn't super out of shape coming back. I mean, obviously I had to recover from having a kid, but I did have some training leading up to having my daughter. And then as soon as I got cleared by my OB to go back to normal activities, I started training to get back on the court. I had my daughter in September, and I was back on the court by November.
Stop it. 2 months. 2 months. You're back at it.
Yeah.
I mean, the female body is resilient, but the fact that you continue to keep in shape, keep up with your weight training, the walking, all of that, I mean, it helps. I tell women all the time, it helps to stay active. You bounce back so much faster. And of course, you're so young. So it's such a quick bounce back. So what did it feel like that first game being back on the court? Was your daughter in the stands?
She was. So we actually had a spring season that following semester. So spring of 2021, because COVID had messed everything up, they pushed our season out to the spring. So I still got a full season with my team after having Shay, my daughter, because, it was just, I mean, it was the way everything fell. And in a way, I'm really glad that as much as COVID sucked, I'm glad that I was still able to have that season with them and still able to travel. And I remember we had one home game that season because of the way the schedule fell, and my daughter came, my friends came. I have so many pictures from her being on the floor, in the locker room, in the stands. And so a lot of my teammates' parents were also there, so they got to see my daughter for the first time. So it was a really special moment to be able to see her in the stands after that whole year.
Absolutely. I mean, because you could have made a choice to just walk away completely or, be too ashamed to come back. And that was just such a beautiful, resilient decision that you made. What does the rest of your collegiate career look like after that season?
So unfortunately, that was my last season with NC State. Because we were in the middle of a coaching change, I was one of 6 of my teammates that ended up being let go. NCAA rules allows coaches that have new or that come in and want to bring in new recruits to let go of former recruits from a different coach. Wow. But they also protect the scholarship of those athletes. Okay. So I was still able to keep my scholarship despite the fact I was no longer playing for the team. So I still got all the resources that any other athlete would have.
And you just kept pursuing your degree.
Yep. So I graduated that. Yep. So we had a club volleyball team at the school. So I went and played for them. And I got picked up by a local school, in 2022 here in Raleigh. We have a bunch of colleges around us. And so I got picked up by a D2 school and was planning to transfer, but was also in the middle of a legal battle at the time and decided that it wasn't the best time for me to transfer and go back to play. So
sure. Can you speak into that legal battle and what that was all about?
It was over custody, but I don't love to go into details. It was a really messy
absolutely
time in my life. And so
absolutely. Yeah. And at some point you end up meeting a mentor or somebody significant to you that really helped change and shape your future.
I do. So after I got let go from the volleyball team at NC State, I met this girl through my church who had an unplanned pregnancy when she was young. And she was like, hey, I would love to come walk alongside you. Turns out I was a finance major. She worked in finance. So she ended up connecting me with her boss. And that was how I ended up getting my internship, which led to a full-time job eventually. And ended up staying with that company for about 2 years. So that was really special to have a job come out of my situation. And then when I did finally change out of the finance industry, I was at another speaking event and I had someone come up to me after and be like, hey, are you by chance looking for a job? And I was like, yes, I am. So that's how I got to the current position that I'm in, is based off of my story as well.
So leaving the volleyball team, that must have been a significant transition. How did you find purpose and direction after that chapter had ended for you?
So that was a challenge, because my whole entire world was around athletics. And then it kind of became an identity of, oh, she's the D1 athlete that got pregnant and came back. So when that got let go, it was a long uphill battle of trying to kind of refigure out who was in my circle, who wasn't, who was with me just because I was an athlete, who was actually my real friend. And so it took about 2 years to kind of get back on my feet as far as figuring out where my friend circle is, who is really going to be there for me in the long run and who's not. But it was also special because I now know for certain the people that I can rely on and trust. And so despite a lot of pain that I walked through during that time, it's kind of been special on the other end because I can talk about it with a lot of my friends. I do pretty regularly. We talk about kind of the stuff that I went through and just how amazing it has been full circle for all of us to kind of see everything come to fruition.
Absolutely. It can be jarring when your social circle changes so abruptly.
Yep.
And you have to get used to the new norm of who am I? Now I'm a mother, but who am I and who is my circle and who is really in my corner, like you were saying. And that is very challenging to navigate so young when you have all the other pressures attached, all the pressures of doing well in school, being the best mom you can be. And now you're looking around at your friendship circle and you're like, all right, like who's going to stick it out with me now that life looks a lot different? So
Right.
I can only imagine how that feels navigating, you know, with being a single mom as well. Can you speak into what single motherhood has felt like?
That has been really hard. Dating as a single mom, especially in your young 20s, sucks. It really does. So I think one of the hardest moments of my entire journey as a single mom was I was also battling health complications about a year ago.
Okay.
I had just come off of the legal battle that I was fighting. Less than 4 hours after the court order went into effect, I was put in the hospital and spent a week in the hospital. That was a really hard time because a lot of my friend group was changing. And so it felt very lonely and isolated. And then when I got out of the hospital, I had family members that had health issues. And so that also became very hard. And I ended up taking quite a bit of time off from sharing my story and speaking at events because I was like, I don't feel like I want to talk about hope because there is no hope. And even though I'm still single, it has been special to kind of see everything come together and see how my story is supposed to be played out despite it may not be the way that I wanted it to be, but it's still special in that I have my little girl and she's my little best friend and we do everything together. Absolutely. Yes, I would love to eventually have a family, but right now it's still special to be with her. And I know that's time I'm not going to get back. So
Mr. Right is out there, girl. I promise you. He is out there. A few episodes ago, I interviewed Chapel Chandler Watkins, and she speaks pretty deeply into single motherhood and how lonely that can be. But when you meet Mr. Right, oh my gosh, how everything shifts and their little family unit has come so close together. And it's hard to imagine life without them. So Mr. Right is out there. I call him the crock pot man. I don't remember where I've heard that before, but I always tell women, you don't want the microwave man, the quick, easy, like he looks good, but he's just, quick and easy right then and there. It's that crock pot guy that, is just simmering. He's out there and he's just prepping himself for you and your daughter one day to become a family. But it's so challenging. I can totally relate to that. Yeah. So looking back, what advice would you give to young women who might find themselves in a similar unplanned pregnancy situation like yourself?
Don't feel like your dreams are shattered. That was literally the first thing I said to the doctor when she told me I was pregnant. I was like, I'm an athlete. I can't be pregnant right now. It's just not possible. And, I mean, I still was able to make it back on the court and have a collegiate career. I got a job out of it. I mean, I get to share my story with other women now and encourage them and walk alongside them and coach volleyball and raise my daughter. And it's super special to be able to see that on the other end. So.
Absolutely. Well, I know it's not easy being vulnerable and on such a public platform, but thank you so much for sharing all the challenges that you face and how you've overcome a lot of these obstacles. And to all of our listeners, we hope to have you back for our next episode of Unplanned and Untold. Bye-bye. Unplanned and Untold drops new episodes every other Wednesday. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a 5-star review if you love this episode. I'm Caitlin Willing, and this is Unplanned and Untold.